It doesn't happen like lightning. It doesn't roar through your life in one dramatic moment. Spiritual awakening often begins quietly. Sometimes it's after heartbreak. Sometimes after losing someone or even losing yourself. And sometimes it's just a quiet morning when you realize you can't keep living the same way anymore. Carl Jung once said that awakening isn't about escaping pain. It's about seeing through it. It's the death of illusion, not the end of struggle. See, people think awakening is about becoming someone new. But what if it's actually about unbecoming everything you're not? What if true awakening is not an addition, but a release? It happens slowly. You start to unlearn. You stop reacting the same way. You stop pretending to enjoy what drains your spirit. You begin to see that peace was never lost. It was just buried under noise. And this process, this silent shift, changes everything. Because as you awaken, you begin to quit slowly, gently, layer by layer. The very things that once defined you, not out of rebellion, but out of remembrance. So stay with me to the very end of this video, because we're going to uncover the 7 things spiritually awake people quit, not all at once, but gradually, as they return home to themselves. And if you're new here, I'd love for you to subscribe right now and join this community of deep thinkers, healers, and old souls. Each week, we explore Jung's timeless insights, truths that help you understand not just the world, but yourself. So take a breath, let's go deeper. Because what comes next might change the way you see doing forever. Let's be honest, our world worships busyness. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. We rush, we multitask, we plan our days down to the minute. And still we feel empty. Have you ever noticed how strange that is? We're doing more than ever, but feeling less alive than ever. Spiritually awake, people begin to see through that illusion. They slowly quit the addiction to constant doing. They sense that movement isn't always progress. Sometimes it's just avoidance. Carl Jung said that real growth doesn't come from chasing. It comes from facing the unconscious, from sitting in the stillness that the busy world is so afraid of. At first, when you stop rushing, it feels uncomfortable. You might even feel guilty for resting, as if stillness is laziness. But slowly, something magical happens. You start to hear yourself again. You begin to realize that silence isn't emptiness. It's the soul speaking in its own quiet language. You no longer chase the next task, the next notification, the next goal. You breathe. And in that single breath, you meet yourself again. You start noticing the sky, the way light hits the wall, the rhythm of your heartbeat. Life slows down and somehow becomes fuller. This is where awakening begins, not in doing more, but in doing less with intention. The awakened person learns to flow instead of force, to be instead of constantly becoming. So let me ask you, when was the last time you were still, truly still without guilt? If this message is already stirring something inside you, don't click away just yet. We're only at the beginning, because the next thing spiritually awake people quit is something that has kept many of us trapped for years. So keep watching till the end. And if this resonates, take a second to subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. You're not just watching, you're remembering. The second thing spiritually awake people slowly quit is the need to be liked by everyone. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But for many, this is one of the hardest prisons to escape, the prison of approval. It's built from years of conditioning, from being told that love must be earned, that kindness means never disappointing anyone. But as awakening deepens, something begins to shift. You start to see that external approval isn't love. It's control disguised as affection. Every time you bend yourself to fit someone else's expectations, a small part of your truth fades away. Carl Jung once said that the greatest tragedy of life is to become what others expect, instead of who you truly are. And spiritually awake, people take that truth to heart. They realize that saying yes to everyone often means saying no to themselves. So they begin to quit slowly, quietly, gracefully, the need to please. They stop over-explaining themselves to those who have already made up their minds. They stop forcing conversations where their silence speaks louder. They stop attending gatherings that drain their spirit just to appear polite. They stop engaging in gossip that lowers their energy, even if it means standing apart. And here's what's beautiful. They don't do it out of anger or pride. They do it out of peace. They realize that trying to be understood by everyone is exhausting and unnecessary. Because truth doesn't need validation, it simply is. At first, it feels lonely. The people who are comfortable with your old self may not understand your new one. But slowly, that loneliness transforms into freedom. You begin to see that not being liked by everyone is not rejection. It's redirection. It's life guiding you back to authenticity. So if you've been feeling that quiet urge to stop performing for approval, trust it. That's your soul reclaiming its voice. And remember this, the more you awaken, the more you understand. Peace is better than being understood. Stay with me till the end, because the next thing spiritually awake people quit might be the very habit that's been keeping your spirit restless. And before we move on, take a moment to subscribe and join our growing circle of thinkers and seekers. Let's keep awakening together. One of the hardest attachments to release on the path of awakening is the fear of being alone. For most of our lives, we're taught to fill every silence with conversation, with company, with noise. We scroll, we talk, we plan. We reach for someone or something to distract us from that quiet space within. But those who begin to awaken slowly realize that constant company often hides a deeper loneliness, the loneliness of being disconnected from one's own soul. Spiritually awake people start to quit this cycle. They stop chasing companionship out of fear, and instead, they begin to value solitude, not as emptiness, but as sacred ground where the self finally speaks. Carl Jung said it beautifully. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. At first, this solitude feels strange, even heavy. You might feel the ache of absence, the echo of quiet rooms, the discomfort of having no one else to distract you from yourself. But slowly, that silence transforms. It becomes peace. It becomes presence. It becomes the language through which your spirit begins to whisper. In those quiet moments, the awakened soul begins to hear parts of themselves they had silenced for years. The wounded inner child, the forgotten dreamer, the wise inner voice that had been waiting patiently beneath all the noise. They start to realize that they were never truly alone. Their soul was always there, softly waiting to be seen, to be heard, to be trusted. This shift changes everything. They no longer seek people to fill their emptiness. They seek connections that honor their wholeness. They stop fearing solitude because they finally understand. It's not a void to escape, but a mirror to enter. It's in that space of aloneness that they begin to meet their truest self, the one untouched by expectations or noise. So if you've ever felt afraid of being alone, know this. Solitude isn't your enemy. It's your initiation. It's where your awakening deepens. And stay with me till the end, because what spiritually awake people quit next might completely change the way you see relationships forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe. This channel is your space for deep reflection, calm awakening, and Jung's timeless wisdom turned into soulful guidance. Let's keep walking this journey together, one truth at a time. One of the most persistent illusions of the human mind is control. The belief that if we plan carefully enough, predict every outcome, and stay vigilant, we can keep life from surprising us. It's comforting to think we're in charge of everything that happens. But spiritual awakening gently dismantles that illusion. Spiritually awake, people slowly begin to quit trying to control the uncontrollable. They start to see that control doesn't come from wisdom. It comes from fear. The fear of uncertainty. The fear of loss. The fear of not knowing who will be if things don't go our way. Through awakening, they begin to realize that life isn't meant to be managed like a project. It's meant to be lived like a river, ever-changing, unpredictable, and flowing towards something far larger than the self. They no longer try to hold the river in their hands. Instead, they learn to flow with it. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He saw surrender not as weakness, but as integration, the moment when the conscious ego bows in humility to the vastness of the unconscious, to the forces of life that move beneath our control. Surrender to Jung was the moment the ego stops pretending it's the master and begins to listen to the deeper self. This surrender doesn't make awakened people passive. It makes them peaceful. They no longer feel the exhausting need to manipulate outcomes or force what isn't ready. Instead, they begin to trust divine timing. They see that everything unfolds when it's meant to, neither sooner nor later. They quit chasing certainty and learn to rest in faith. They stop asking, how do I make this happen? And begin asking, what is life trying to show me here? And maybe that's the quiet power of awakening. It teaches us that control was never the goal. Peace was. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what would happen if, just for one day, you stopped forcing and simply allowed? That's the beginning of trust. That's where awakening deepens. The fifth thing spiritually awake people quit is shallow connections. As their awareness deepens, something within them shifts. They no longer crave the noise of constant companionship. They crave depth, meaning, and truth. The endless chatter, the forced laughter, the relationships that revolve around convenience rather than connection. They begin to fade. Spiritually awake people realize that drama is not intimacy, and attention is not love. They stop feeding relationships that drain their energy. They no longer chase people who only appear when it's convenient. They choose presence over popularity, silence over small talk, truth over comfort. This shift can be painful, because awakening often means outgrowing, not abandoning. Many friendships dissolve quietly, not out of anger, but because the frequencies no longer match. What once felt familiar now feels heavy. Conversations that used to excite now feel empty. And instead of pretending, they begin to honor that inner discomfort as a sign of growth. Carl Jung understood this stage well. He wrote that individuation requires separation from the collective illusion. That means to find the self, one must step away from the masks of belonging. This is that moment, the quiet unpairing from relationships that were built on shared illusions rather than shared souls. Spiritually awake people begin to see that love without honesty is not love at all. They no longer confuse attachment with connection or approval with care. Their relationships become mirrors, not masks, places where truth can breathe instead of being suffocated by pretense. They would rather walk alone in truth and be surrounded by people who fear it. It's not bitterness, it's liberation. It's the realization that solitude with authenticity feels lighter than company built on false harmony. And yet, through this shedding, something beautiful happens. They begin to attract souls who see them, not their facade. People who value the same depth. Connections that no longer require pretending. Stay with me to the end. Because the last two things spiritually awake people quit are the most transformative ones. They are the ones that truly set them free from everything that once held them back. And before we move on, if this resonates with your journey, don't forget to subscribe. Because this channel is where we walk together through Jung's timeless wisdom, one awakening at a time.